Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1179B, and today's date is January 16th, 2017, and the title of the episode is, One Group Just Got Caught Planning Something Unbelievable During the Inauguration. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, just 2 days after both the House and Senate passed a budget resolution clearing the way to repeal and replace Obamacare, Trump came out and he said that his replacement bill is nearly complete and he envisions insurance for everyone. The plan, he said, would include lower numbers, much lower deductibles, and he really didn't elaborate much further than that. He did say we're going to have insurance for everybody, and we don't know anything about it right now. So we'll have to wait to see what turns out here, because we've heard this before, and we've seen premiums rise. We've seen individuals not able to get insurance. And he did say one thing that's very important is that he doesn't want a single payer type of program. So what type of program is it? We'll have to wait and see. Now, the corporate media is out there, and they're saying that Trump, well, he wants to limit the media that comes to the White House briefings. And we see from Esquire magazine said that the incoming Trump administration is seriously considering a plan to evict the press corps from the White House. And, of course, all these different journalists are out there. This is ridiculous, and all the corporate media is out there saying, see, we knew it. He's letting us go. Well, that's not what's happening. What they're going to do is expand who is coming into the White House briefings. They will keep the corporate media, but they're going to add bloggers, the alternative media. There's going to be more bloggers, more vloggers coming in and joining in with the corporate media, which means this is going to be a huge problem for the corporate media. Why, you might ask? Because the bloggers and the vloggers, the alternative media that's there, well, they're going to report things much differently than how the corporate media is going to be reporting it. The things that the corporate media is going to leave out are things that the alternative media are going to put in. And the corporate media is not going to like this. The alternative media doesn't care. There's no corporate-backed financing. Most of these bloggers and vloggers, well, we're funding everything ourselves. And we could see that this is going to be a huge problem for the corporate media, who continually says that there's fake news out there. Of course, they're taking this term back because they don't want people to understand that they are the fake news, because the alternative media and many people are pointing at the fake stories that the corporate media is putting out there. And this is why they don't like the term fake news anymore. So this, we can see this is going to be a big problem. And of course, right off the bat, they got the entire story completely wrong. Now, we see the CIA chief, he is warning Trump to watch his words. And we see right now Trump is saying that the CIA is leaking information, that they're the problem. And the last time somebody went up against the CIA was John F. Kennedy, and we know what happened to John F. Kennedy. But we could see at this point is that the CIA is kind of threatening Trump right now, because they want him to fall in line. Really what they're saying is, listen, you better play ball or else. Now remember, the CIA director, he's going to be replaced by Trump's pink, which is Mike Pompeo. But Pompeo, I'm not sure which way he's going to move on these situations, because we can see that he's moving towards Russian aggression. And once he gets into the CIA, we know those in the deep state, well, they protect themselves. They take control of the situation. They blackmail certain individuals into doing what they want. So we'll have to see how this goes, and we'll have to see, is Trump going to play ball, or is something else going to happen? Because we know already they're worried about him. He's a loose cannon. This is why they're trying to interrupt the inauguration. This is why they've been trying to get him out of the White House. And I don't think this is done at all. I think they're going to continually try, even after the inauguration. I think they're going to push their agenda forward. Now, former newspaper editor who exposed the CIA, and this is Dr. Udo Olfkott, the former German newspaper editor. He wrote a book which was called, and it was a bestseller, which was titled Bought Journalists. Well, he was killed by the CIA. He was found dead. He was 56 years old. He was running one of the largest newspapers in Germany, and he died of heart failure. Now, we know the CIA likes to get rid of those individuals that are calling them out on certain things, and they use different methods of getting rid of people. Maybe there's an accident. I know there's a device that can cause heart failure that the CIA does use. And we see right now that this is very suspicious when you look at who this person is, the book they wrote, and he might have been knocked off by the CIA. And Trump, who is going up against the CIA, the deep state, the elite, well, they might eventually say, you know what? He's not playing ball. We're going to have to get rid of him. We see the globalists who are having their meeting in Davos, Switzerland. Well, they're planning an emergency Washington, D.C. meeting in 2017 to talk about what they're going to do about Trump. And the globalists are very worried about movements around the world. And when I say movements, I mean the movements away from globalization and the movement towards populism. And we see there's a major problem facing Davos. One is the loss of credibility, as the majority of people now believe the economic and political system is failing them. And they're starting to say, you know something? This whole experiment, it is not working. Because when we really look at this, the richest 1% has owned more wealth than the rest of the planet. And the rest of the planet is saying we have problems. Because what has happened over time is that the wealth has been siphoned up to the rich, because under this globalist model, under this central banking model, which that's what it really is, they put countries into debt, they steal the hard assets, they steal the wealth of the country, and the people suffer for it. Well, throughout history, when this occurs and you have a huge population that is suffering, the suffering population rises up. And that suffering population decides to go after those individuals that caused the problem. And we've seen it throughout history, especially when there were kings and queens and the rest of their subjects were living in poverty and they were taxed and taxed and taxed. Well, the people rose up and they went to the castle and they took the king and queen and they beheaded them. They said, enough's enough. We can't take this anymore. We saw it here in the U.S. during the Revolution. Well, you know what? You continually put pressure on us. We don't want to be subservient to the king. Guess what happens? A revolution occurs. And this is what we're seeing right now. People are saying enough is enough. And they want a change. Now, the elite, guess what? They're not ready for this change. That's why they're having the emergency meeting. Because they're strategizing on how to combat this. And we'll have to see what they come up with. Now, on Friday's report, I mentioned that Trump was looking at lifting sanctions for Russia, and it looks like he's going to be using the sanctions as leverage. And he's going to try to force Russia into reducing their nuclear arms. Now, of course, Russia is going to say, well, the U.S. has to do the same. How well would this work? I don't really know. But we need to look again at the heart of the sanctions. Where did this all come from? Why are they there? And by using this as leverage, this might cause more problems than the actual sanctions. Now, it all depends on how Putin responds to this. If this does go further than just Trump talking about it, Putin might say, okay, you know something? Let's do this. Let's talk deals, because we can see that Putin, he's a diplomat. He wants to talk. He wants to make deals. And maybe there will be a deal made. But we'll have to wait to see how this turns out. Now, Obama is doing one last trick before he leaves the White House. The latest deployment of U.S. troops and tanks to Eastern Europe, well, it has been arranged in a way that circumvents a Russia-NATO peace deal limiting the number of permanent forces in the region. In general terms, it should be noted that this deployment is little more than a trick to evade the agreement between Russia and NATO. Because what they're doing is they're saying it's part of a joint drill. We have rotating troops. There's nothing permanent there. And the U.S. uses this type of trick in all different types of situations. In Iraq, for instance, they made a deal. The United States government central bankers made a deal with the Iraqis, and they said, listen, you can bring in about 4,500 permanent troops, and that's it. Well, the rest of the troops that are there, they're called temporary. So they have the 4,500 or so permanent troops, and the other 10,000 or so or more, they're temporary troops with no expiration date, and they're rotational. So they're always looking for ways to get around the agreements they make with countries. We see the U.S.-led airstrikes. In Mosul, it has killed dozens of civilians. They were looking to hit a commander in a building, and this individual that was supposed to be there was not there. Instead, there were 25 to 30 civilian bystanders around the area, and the U.S. coalition forces came in, blew up the entire area. Now, the U.S. is out there saying, we're looking into this, we don't know for sure. And we've seen the U.S. do this quite often in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, where they kill many, many civilians. We see out in Syria, the International Humanitarian Organization has provided no assistance to the civilians of Aleppo whatsoever. The West, no humanitarian aid. The Western media completely ignoring it. Coming from Russia, what they're saying is that people are now returning to Aleppo. They're cleaning up the rubble, but there is no humanitarian aid coming in from the West. Russia is bringing in humanitarian aid. The Syrian government is bringing in humanitarian aid. But the U.S. that is so concerned about the people inside of Syria, absolutely nothing. We see the Islamic State, they have successfully split Deir Ezzor into two. Now, of course, we know the United States government central bankers, they were in Raqqa, they were in Deir Ezzor, and of course, it just so happens they split this into two. Now, the Islamic State, they were sending in suicide bombers to weaken the Syrian armed defenses in this area, and this was a huge offensive of about 14,000 Islamic State fighters, and the U.S. and the coalition forces nowhere to be found. This looks like it was completely planned. We see that Russia is inviting Trump and his administration to the Syrian peace talks with Turkey, Syria, and Iran. Now, we'll have to wait until Donald Trump is inaugurated, and we'll have to see what he does at that point. Now, Obama did say something very interesting to Trump. He said, anything you say can start wars. Now, we know that Obama has been moving military assets, moving troops, provoking Russia, expelling 35 diplomats, continually saying Russian aggression, talking about cyber attacks. And then he says, listen, you better be very careful, because anything you say, anything you do, any action you take might kick off a war. Now, to me is he's saying that things are already set up and planned and we're ready to move forward with this war and we're just waiting for you to screw up somehow, some way. And if you don't, we'll make it look like you screwed up to get this war started. Now, we understand the inauguration is coming up, and Project Veritas just put out another video where they had investigators uncover a group of protesters known as the DC Anti-Fascist Coalition, and they were plotting to disrupt President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration by deploying stink bombs at the National Press Club during the deplorable event scheduled for January 19th. And they were planning to completely shut down the inauguration. They were thinking of ways of setting off the sprinkler systems in the buildings, making everyone leave the buildings all wet and have them move outside into the cold. And this is not the only group that is planning to shut things down. Now, over the weekend, we reported that there was weapons found in a Violin case, and the police found more weapons and ammunition stashed away. And we know that the establishment, the elite, they don't want Trump entering the White House. They've been trying everything they possibly can to keep him out. They don't want him entering. They tried the recount vote. They tried the Russian hacking. They tried to have the electors vote for someone else by putting pressure on them, by threatening them. And here we are leading up to the inauguration, and they're going to do whatever they possibly can to get this thing stopped. I mean, Rosie O'Donnell's out there calling for martial law. But what we're seeing right now is that these plans are in motion. We know there's going to be agent provocateurs. We know they're going to try to do whatever they possibly can to get things started. Will it work? We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. All depending on how these crowds react. Remember, the small group of agent provocateurs are going to try to get the bigger crowd involved. If they can't do that, their whole entire plan will not work. Now, we know from this undercover video, they do have other plans of having stink bombs or setting off sprinklers, maybe having an explosion. There was weapons found. Maybe they were trying to have some type of mass shooting or a false flag hoax of a mass shooting. But at this point, it looks like they're becoming very, very desperate to get this started. They want to stop what is happening. Now, if everything goes smoothly and there's no problems in the inauguration and everything they planned does not work, it doesn't mean the globalists, the elite, the central bank has stopped, because they want Trump to play ball. Once they figure out that he's not playing ball, or he never played ball, their next phase is assassination. Their next phase is to get rid of him. And they're going to try to start a war. They're going to bring down the economy. And they want him to play ball. They want him to go ahead with the war. They want him to do what they want. Now, there's a new intelligence report which warns of an increased risk of conflict between nations in the next 5 years. And they're saying that this risk is increasing to levels not seen since the Cold War. According to the report, we're living in a paradox, and the post-World War II order is eroding. The report also states that the increased risk is because global growth is slowing, and anti-globalization is fueling nationalism. These trends will converge at an unprecedented pace to make governing and cooperation harder and to change the nature of power. And this report is published every 4 years by the National Intelligence Council. And what they're saying here is that things are changing rapidly. And those who are in power, they don't like the change. They don't want the change. And we can see that they will not give up their power. They rather have a major conflict. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.